Choice often appears to belong to governments, rulers, or institutions. Yet long before policies are announced or borders are redrawn, the landscape has already begun reducing the number of workable paths. Rivers determine where grain can move. Mountains decide which valleys remain connected. Harbors concentrate trade into a handful of sheltered coastlines. Roads inherit the decisions of terrain long before engineers improve them. Political reality often appears to emerge from deliberate action, but beneath every visible decision lies an older network of routes, distances, and physical constraints that quietly shape what becomes practical. History repeatedly reveals that infrastructure is not simply a consequence of civilization. It becomes one of the conditions through which civilization understands its own possibilities. The deeper the network grows, the more future decisions begin following paths established years, sometimes centuries, earlier. One of the clearest examples can be found across the river systems and transportation corridors of Imperial China. Stretching from the fertile plains surrounding the Yellow River to the rice-producing regions farther south, the empire covered landscapes divided by mountains, floodplains, deserts, and thousands of kilometers of distance. Seasonal rivers shifted course. Monsoon patterns altered navigation. Mountain chains redirected overland travel into narrow corridors. The Grand Canal connected northern political centers with southern agricultural production, while secondary waterways linked towns, warehouses, and regional markets into an immense logistical web. Grain, tax revenue, construction materials, military provisions, and commercial goods all moved through physical channels whose geography existed long before any dynasty attempted to govern them. The terrain established continuity. Infrastructure attempted to negotiate it. The significance of these routes was not simply that they enabled movement. They concentrated movement. Every bridge reduced uncertainty in one direction while increasing dependence upon that crossing. Every canal shortened one journey while encouraging future settlements to organize themselves around its banks. Warehouses appeared where transport naturally paused. Markets expanded where several routes intersected. Administrative centers gradually occupied locations where information and goods could arrive with the greatest regularity. Infrastructure accumulated because previous infrastructure already existed. Distance therefore became something negotiated rather than eliminated. A shipment traveling hundreds of kilometers rarely followed a single uninterrupted route. Riverboats transferred cargo to storage depots. Caravans crossed mountain passes before reaching navigable water again. Labor shifted repeatedly between transport systems that each possessed different seasonal limits. Small interruptions accumulated into significant delays, not because any individual stage failed, but because every transition introduced another point where geography asserted itself. Farmers adjusted planting schedules to coincide with expected transport windows, rather than local harvest conditions alone. River levels determined when grain could leave storage as much as agricultural productivity determined when it became available. Infrastructure gradually transformed these recurring adjustments into expectation. Roads invited maintenance because traffic already depended upon them. Bridges justified reinforcement because alternative crossings required substantially greater effort. Canal dredging continued because neglect threatened every settlement connected downstream. Investment increasingly flowed toward established routes, strengthening the very corridors that earlier geography had selected. Structure reproduced itself through practical necessity. The effect extended beyond transportation. Information followed similar channels. Administrative reports traveled along roads already supporting commerce. Tax collection aligned with existing market rhythms because merchants, warehouses, and transport schedules had become synchronized over generations. Military logistics depended upon granaries positioned beside waterways capable of sustaining predictable movement. Even when governments changed, Much of the underlying circulation remained recognizable because replacing entire logistical systems demanded greater resources than adapting existing ones. Silence often revealed these dependencies more clearly than activity. When flooding interrupted a canal section, the absence of movement spread gradually across regions far removed from the damaged embankment. Warehouses filled faster than expected. Animal caravans accepted heavier loads despite slower travel. Secondary roads experienced unfamiliar congestion. None of these adjustments appeared dramatic in isolation. Together, they exposed how extensively ordinary coordination relied upon uninterrupted infrastructure. Merchants rerouted cargo through longer inland paths, while settlements farther north extended storage periods, waiting for supplies delayed by conditions hundreds of kilometers away. Over time, infrastructure also shaped economic incentives without requiring deliberate direction. Craftsmen established workshops near dependable transport because raw materials arrived more consistently there. Agricultural specialization expanded, where reliable distribution reduced the risks associated with producing surplus. Ports handling regular traffic attracted additional investment precisely because previous investment had already increased their accessibility. Success accumulated geographically before it appeared economically. The network, therefore, became increasingly difficult to reconsider. Constructing a new route involved more than engineering. It required redirecting labor, markets, storage facilities, maintenance systems, and habits that had gradually synchronized around earlier infrastructure. Existing roads influenced where future roads seemed reasonable. Existing canals determined where additional canals promised the greatest return. Every improvement inherited the assumptions embedded within previous improvements. A subtle shift emerged. Infrastructure no longer responded solely to geography. Geography and infrastructure together began directing future expansion. Settlements grew toward roads already carrying traffic. Administrative districts formed around transport corridors capable of sustaining communication. Commercial relationships deepened where logistics consistently rewarded repetition. Structure accumulated until alternatives appeared increasingly impractical, even before anyone compared them directly. Workers repairing embankments compensated for recurring erosion because seasonal transport depended upon predictable water levels. Their labor maintained continuity rather than transforming the system. Eventually, the pattern became visible. Political authority often appeared capable of reshaping territory through law, taxation, or administration. Yet, those instruments repeatedly depended upon networks assembled through decades of accumulated movement. Recognition arrived only after infrastructure had already narrowed the available directions for adaptation. Governments could choose among remaining options, but the landscape supporting those options had been assembled gradually by countless earlier adjustments. At what point does a transportation network cease serving political organization and begin determining the practical boundaries within which political organization can operate? The roads remain after policies change. Harbors continue concentrating exchange despite shifting administrations. Rivers preserve their gradients regardless of changing borders. Infrastructure does not eliminate human choice. It quietly defines where meaningful choice can still exist. The longer a network succeeds, the more future coordination depends upon preserving its accumulated logic. Recognition, therefore, arrives late, not because the structure was hidden, but because its ordinary operation seemed indistinguishable from normal life. History often changes before anyone realizes the available choices have already narrowed. If these questions continue to matter, Timeless Questions explores them every week. Could any decision have meaningfully changed the structure once the network itself had become the strongest incentive?